Hey guys, it's Danny. Hope you all had a great weekend. Today it is time to talk about Phalaenopsis orchids. Yes, it is September for many of you guys. It's already autumn, and when we say autumn, we say new flower spike season. So discussions from now on will look at Phalaenopsis as well, because it's the season. So let's start off by thinking about how to make these orchids bloom faster. Now, if you're not new to my channel and you know the difference that me moving countries meant for my orchids, you can skip to this part of the video. But if you're new, here's a little bit of a backstory. A few years ago, I was living and growing my orchids in Romania, which has a temperate climate. Funny thing about Romania, this time of the year, temperatures during nighttime go as low as 15 or 14 degrees Celsius. And my mom already informed me that those are the temperatures right now. For Phalaenopsis orchids, this temperature triggers new flower spike formation. Hence, in my old balcony, I was having new flower spikes starting to develop as soon as the end of September, most of them beginning of October. Here in this climate, which is a subtropical Mediterranean climate, things don't work like that. I have new flower spikes somewhere in November. And this is because here the low temperatures come in October, towards the end, sometimes even November if it's a warm year. Ever since I moved here, my Phalaenopsis start new flower spike production in November, and they actually bloom next year. A little side note, I do have a whole discussion regarding flower spike production and what triggers it on Phalaenopsis orchids. I'll share it with you down below. I'm not going to insist on it right now, but just know that I am of the opinion that temperature is the only thing that triggers blooming. In my experience moving countries, I have not observed day length, temperature variation, or anything of the sorts being the cause. There are people who do believe those are the causes, and that's okay. Being that I do have the experience that I have, I don't really take into account all of the other things. I'm only interested in the temperature drop. So that's what we're gonna focus on today. Because I thought, what if I can actually deliver lower temperatures a little sooner to my Phalaenopsis orchids, thus making them spike a little sooner and flower a little sooner? Because an outcome of late flowering in my climate is that the flowers don't typically last as long. Since in March, we can already have temperatures of 25 degrees Celsius or more, which is a lot. And flowers typically last better in lower temperatures. And I think I do have a way to deliver lower temperatures a little bit sooner. Here's what I thought. I'm going to place my Phalaenopsis orchids outside. And here's the explanation. My growth space, even though it's not a greenhouse, it kind of acts like a greenhouse. We are talking about a temperature inertia. Because the walls are heated up during daytime, in the nighttime they radiate this heat or warmth, and my growth space simply doesn't go as low as the outside world. It's not until the end of October or November when temperatures outside start to not be so hot and the walls don't get so heated up. So the growth space starts to reach that 18 degrees Celsius temperature that I'm looking for. But outside, this temperature can actually come sooner. So what if I expose my Phalaenopsis orchids to the outside temperature rather than the growth space temperature? If my theories are correct, then theoretically I should have spikes a little bit sooner. Will I have them next week or in September? Probably not. So my aim is flower spikes in October, not November, and we'll see if we can pull it off. For this, I placed a shelf dedicated only for Phalaenopsis orchids in a shady place on my terrace. These phals will not receive any type of direct sunshine, not even in the morning time, but it will be okay for them because the location is pretty bright. And of course, I shall not leave them outside during winter, not even summertime, but I do want to put them through the transition when it happens outside, not when my growth space decides it can cool down. And when the flower spikes are initiated, I can return the Phalaenopsis to my growth space because afterwards, the warmer temperatures actually boost the speed with which the flower spikes grow. So that is the project that I have for the following couple of months or so. I shall keep you up to date, but before I will place my phals outside, I am going to change the setup for them. As you can see, some of my phals are already repotted in a transparent plastic pot. They have organic media. Here is the catch. The self-watering setup was all nice, but I cannot really change the properties of the leca. I can only try to modify them or help myself as much as I can, but I cannot make them more wicking than they actually are. As a result, in the warmer seasons, which are almost all the time here, I have a little issue. I have a lot of water towards the bottom of the pot and in the reservoir, and a lot of dryness towards the top. Now, Phalaenopsis roots are wicking, but there is a limit to their wicking capabilities, especially with big orchids. They will reach the water down below. Some of the roots will start to wick, but they're not gonna get optimal amount of water or nutrients for that matter. And I've told you this before, I don't like setups which only have a portion of the roots wet and the other portion dry and left to wick whatever water is at the bottom. I don't feel like I like them. I don't feel like they work like I want them to work. And sadly, in the warm season, this is what happens to leca. I cannot make it more wicking than it is. And getting smaller grade leca, even if I order it from the internet, which I don't want to do, it's just not economical, will not necessarily be good for Phalaenopsis orchids. We have very thick roots here. And you know how the joke goes, we laugh, we joke, we leave comments, but when I get frustrated, it's not funny anymore. So I'm gonna do something about it because as you can see, and these are the worst cases actually, but because of this issue with the leca, some of these orchids are not hydrated properly. I don't know if they even feed correctly given the pH situation, which I'm trying to correct, but I'm over it. I'm done with it. Oops, let's not destroy the decor. So yeah, for all of these reasons, it's not funny anymore to me. I don't have a good time. So I'm gonna change the setup and I'll show you the setup, which is not a new setup. It's pretty much going back to the roots, no pun intended. So what I will be using today are some slotted pots from Repot Me. These are the biggest size, the 6-inch size, because my Phals are big girls. And you might know that I am partnered with Repot Me for the past more than a year already. So even though this video is not sponsored, I did receive these pots because they asked if I need anything and I said, oh yeah, I need those pots. So I got a whole bunch of them, rainbow colored because I requested them specifically for this project. And of course, a decorative pot. I will be reusing my plastic decorative pots because these orchids are very, very heavy, and going for a clay decorative pot that size, it will just make things so heavy. They will become a hazard pretty much, and I don't want that. Inside we have a mixture of bark and sphagnum moss, which is the medium that I'm kind of using nowadays for pretty much everybody, and I'm controlling the ratio of moss and bark for specific type of orchids. And because you are going to ask, I could have used moss and leca as well to resolve the issue with the layering, but I simply don't want to because I don't like how things perform. On the top you might note that I put a layer which is not moss, because moss attracts a lot of algae here. If I do a setup with leca and moss, I would be tempted to put the leca on top, but then we have the efflorescence issue, salt buildup at the top, which I don't want. I could also go for leca and moss and then a top layer of bark, but why? I don't see the point. So I'm just gonna make it bark and sphagnum moss. This is smaller grade bark, medium to small grade, which works great in my climate since it's hot. It might be way too fine for certain climates. So beware, if you want to go for something similar, take into account your environment. The smaller grade the bark, the smaller the air pockets, the more chances you have that the pot will dry out slower. If this is what you're looking for, then yeah, definitely do try this size out. If not, try a bigger size. But also keep in mind, the bigger the bark pieces, the harder it will be to remove them when you're gonna repot the orchid. Makes sense. If you're gonna have the root attached to this big of a bark piece, you'll have to remove it all across the length, right? If you're gonna have this piece attached, you're gonna have to remove it like this, and that's it. I don't know why I made that sound. And I think that's about it. Oh, P.S. Some of these Phals do still have their older flower spikes. I keep them on for an experiment. Most of the Phals don't have flower spikes anymore. I don't like to maintain older spikes on them. I like new flushes of flowering, not old ones. It's a preference. You can absolutely leave the flower spikes on your orchid, and you know, in time you see what you prefer more. So with that out of the way, I'll repot one of these orchids for you today, and we're gonna place all of these orchids outside. Alright, so today let's just work with the Singolo. Do you remember this one? Somebody actually asked me how it's doing, how are the leaves? Well, it's still growing. We're in full vegetative season here. It's still hot, but you can see that the leaves have grown bigger and bigger. If you don't know the story with the Singolo and what the Singolo is, I'll link you to it down below, a short resume of that. It is an orchid which I believe is treated with stunting hormones, so it stays more compact, and also its flower spike, it's cut right above the first flower to give the impression of a sort of one-flowered Phalaenopsis. It's all fake, quotation marks, and the orchid is nothing but a beautiful white big-flowered hybrid. So that's what I'm trying to bring out of it. I'm trying to get rid of that hormone, which I'm not doing anything really. The orchid is getting rid of it by itself. All I'm doing is just treating it as best as I can, feeding, watering, all of that fun stuff. And you can see the leaves have grown bigger and bigger. It has grown 3 leaves in my care. This one, which still was stunted. This one, which was bigger, you can see, but it's still a little stunted. And this one, which is looking a little bit more normal. But yeah, this orchid is supposed to be huge, huge leaf-wise. Anyway, so let's just go ahead and repot it. And even the roots are just not having it. We have a lot of moisture here, not so much here. Roots can also die off due to desiccation. So we're gonna have to work a little bit on the roots as well, but first I will get rid of all of this medium. Alrighty, so when identifying dead roots, it's always a good idea to actually touch them, because you would think, oh, this root is dead, but it's not. And actually the color of the leca, which transferred a little bit on the roots, might make you think that these brownish roots are all gone. They're not. They're actually very, very stiff and in good condition. But something like this, obviously, is not alive anymore. So if you cannot really tell if a root is gone, just press a little bit on it and you'll be able to figure it out. So I will go ahead and cut away all of the dried and dead roots. And on this orchid, you can actually see that the older roots are just weird looking, very stumpy, very thick. I don't think this is normal. I have never seen anything like this, even on bigger Phalaenopsis. You can see that as the time went by, the roots started to look more like the other Phalaenopsis, which seems to me a little bit more normal. So I do think that whatever substances were used on this orchid are starting to wear off. You can see even in the pot, the orchid created brand new roots, which look normal. They don't look so stumpy. So yeah, based on what I see overall, I think she's starting to return to her natural self. I don't believe what we find on the market labeled Singolos are very natural looking. I don't think they're how they're supposed to look like. So if you know my presentation of these pots that I did last year, you know that they can come in various colors. And back then we had a few colors to play with, but I told Repot Me that I actually want all of the colors. I want to see how they look like. So I have a whole rainbow of colors here. So what color should we choose for this orchid? All of them are translucent. They're not actually opaque. Even the black one I see, but obviously it would be easier to see the roots on something like this. So there we can see my hand through the pot. I think because this orchid has white flowers that I will actually go with a transparent pot. Oh wait, I see something. Oh, this is cute. Okay, I think I will go for something like this, which is still translucent, but it's not completely transparent. So this is the one that I will choose for this one. So as I was saying, we're gonna use the formula that I use typically with all of my orchids now, but for those of you who are new, I like to start off with a layer of sphagnum moss, which will make sure that if I have anything on the bottom of my decorative pot or dish, it will be absorbed. It's just not gonna sit there and degrade my bark. And I do also make my mixture as I go. I don't prepare it separately because it's just a little more inconvenient to work with. This is just easier and it's pretty much the same result. And here we are, my orchid is potted. I watered it well, and you can see that we can actually see through the pot, even if it's not opaque. So I did want to try out all of the colors and all of the varieties, and you'll see them with my Phalaenopsis throughout all of these months. Because when I made the video on these pots initially, people were saying, oh, I actually didn't realize they were so colorful, because I don't like to use decorative containers. So if you don't like to use decorative containers, but you want a little bit of color, these are pretty great. I really like them. Even if I'm not gonna be seeing them necessarily, I'm gonna be putting my orchids in decorative pots, it's still okay. I do, however, see that I need bigger pots. These are the older ones that I had, and I think I will be using these for the 14 centimeter pots. These are 15 centimeter pots. They're the biggest, so they're a little too tight. But plastic decorative pots are really inexpensive in comparison to clay pots. So there we have it. I will do this with all of my Phalaenopsis, and I shall put them outside, and fingers crossed we can actually have new flower spikes emerging sooner than we did before. Again, I'm not expecting miracles and overnight results because it's still warm here. It's incredibly warm. Cannot wait for autumn at this point. But I do hope that I will see some flower spikes in October rather than November, and that would be perfect timing because my phals are still growing leaves and I want them to mature the leaves before flower spikes. I did notice with many of them that they do have the tendency to pause their growing leaves to grow the flower spike and then continue in the springtime. So if I can time it so that the new leaves will completely mature before the flower spikes, I will be very happy. If not, I'll do the best I can with the temperatures I've got. Alrighty then, so I'll keep you up to date on the flower spike production and the timing. And with that said, you know the drill. Like or dislike this video below, subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, Q&As, and other fun orchid subjects. And if you wish to support the channel, do consider visiting the merch store down below. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!